Assalamu alaikum and welcome to In Conversation with me, FEMIDA Kassim. It was just last month when the Democratic Republic of Congo's President Felix Tshisekedi officially took over the annual rotating chairship of the African Union for 2021 from South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa. Joining us today to unpack the DRC's plans for the AU is His Excellency Ambassador Bene Mpoko. Firstly, congratulations and welcome, Ambassador.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Ambassador, how has it been so far for your office since taking over from South Africa?
Well, it has been very busy because we had to do the handover. And to do the handover from South Africa to DRC, we had to establish two panels, the DRC panels and South Africa panel. So the role of the South Africa panel is to hand over the whole AU dossier, so to speak, to DRC. So he has been quite busy through that process.
Ambassador, from what I'm aware, you're the longest serving ambassador in South Africa. Please share with us what exactly your various roles entail, and also please share with us more about your recent Ubuntu Award.
Yes, as ambassador to South Africa, we have a very, very large program. We have signed almost over 40 bilateral agreements. So with South Africa, we collaborate in all sectors, whether it's security, economic, culture, agriculture, and so forth. So it's a big program between DRC and South Africa. Now, as the Dean of the Diplomatic Corps, I play the role of the link between the diplomatic community in South Africa, which is very large. It's the second largest diplomatic representation after Washington, D.C. So I play the link between the diplomatic corps, the international community, and the South African government. So when the South African government would like to have issues that would like to test or discuss with the diplomatic corps, they come through the dean. When the diplomatic community have concerns, they also come through the dean. For instance, the main concern in the diplomatic community today is whether members of the diplomatic corps will be eligible for the vaccine, to be vaccinated in South Africa. Not only the members of the diplomatic corps, but also their dependents. So they come to me, and then I transfer those concerns to the South African government. From the South African government, for instance, about 2-3 weeks ago, the Honorable Minister DeLille had this thing about expropriation bill without compensation. So she wanted the opinion of the diplomatic community, international community. So she came to me asking me to organize a Zoom meeting with the diplomatic corps so she can bounce off this bill to the diplomatic community to get their input. So that's the kind of role I play. It's basically a full-time job. Being the Dean of Diplomatic Corps in an environment where you have a large diplomatic community.
So it entails a lot of communication between you and the different ambassadors from other countries. I'm sure it's very time-consuming.
Yes, very much so. Even the private sector, some companies, they come to establish themselves in South Africa, international companies. And if they would like to extend their operations to the rest of the continent, they come through the dean. They say, okay, I have these projects. I would like to extend my operation to the rest of Africa. What do you advise me to do? Where do I start? Where do I go? And so forth. Which country? And some of them, they know the countries. They say, I want to do something in Angola or in Namibia. Would you put me in touch with the ambassador of Angola? You know, so they come through the dean because they don't know that's the link between themselves and the rest of the continent. So it's, again, as I said, it's a full-time job by itself.
And with regards to your Ubuntu Award, congratulations. Please also share us more about that.
Well, what happened is that I've been in South Africa. I came to South Africa with the UN So I was the head of UN here for 5 years, from 95 to 2000. So I worked very well with the government of President Mandela and with the Deputy President, President Mbeki at that time. And then even after that, I continued to interact with the South African government. So during the Mandela government, I played a major role. For instance, I worked very closely with Minister Jeff Radebe when he was Minister of Infrastructure. I worked with Minister Dlamini Zuma when he was the Minister of Health. So I played the role as a UN to support the new South African government. So when I also became ambassador, I played at the roles. And as a dean, I just mentioned the kind of role I've been playing as a dean. So South African government wanted to reward me. They created a special category called Ambassadorial Excellence. The category doesn't exist in the Ubuntu, because the Ubuntu Award is designed to reward South African citizens who have excelled or contributed in their particular area. But I was the first foreigner to be awarded for the contribution that the little contribution that I have made. So they had to create a special category for me called Ambassadorial Excellence. So hence I was gratified with that Ubuntu Award.
That's an amazing achievement, ambassadorial excellence. And now with the DRC heading the AU, will your portfolio of responsibilities increase?
Definitely, because as I said, you see, South Africa still plays a role in the AU because they are the rapporteur within the AU structure, okay? In the AU structure. So I still had to interact with South Africa because they are the rapporteur of the African Union. So I still have to play that role. And also, as I said, although they have done the handover, but there are a lot of follow-up to do. We had to do the follow-up. So I still have to interact with South Africa with respect to the African Union. Also, as a DRC ambassador, we had to find a way to support the President Tshisekedi himself in terms of the role that he's going to play. You know, we had to channel ideas, we had to tell him what's happening on the ground in South Africa, in the other African countries. So, and then as ambassador also, I had to chair the meeting for the all African ambassadors in South Africa with respect to the AU matters. And as you know, we also have the Pan-African Parliament, which is based right here in South Africa. So we had to accompany the work of the Pan-African government, Parliament in South Africa. So my role as ambassador with respect to AU would increase, yeah. People actually ask me the question, but if you do all that, when do you sleep? I say, I don't.
I was just about to ask you, Ambassador, I mean, how is there possibly a family life in between all of this that you have to do?
Yeah, but one has to do it. We had to commit to the uplifting of this continent. The continent needs us, so we had to be there.
Amazing, amazing work, Ambassador, one of a kind. You're an amazing individual. I just wanted to also ask you, you mentioned early on about the vaccinations for the diplomatic corps. How does this work for the diplomatic guests? How does this work?
Unfortunately, they have not clarified to us how it's going to work. Okay. All I have been told is that because we live in South Africa, because President Ramaphosa said all those living in South Africa will have access to the vaccine. But we as diplomatic corps were still waiting for the procedures and the protocols in terms of how it's going to work, with not only with respect to the diplomats, but also their dependents and so forth. So they have not clarified to us yet how it's going to work. All we know is that we will be included.
And what about the diplomats? Sorry, Ambassador, what was that?
No, I said we are waiting to see how they are going to include us and our families and dependents and so forth. Yeah.
And what about the diplomats whose countries have already started issuing out the vaccinations? Do they plan to go to the countries and then get the vaccination and come back, or do they have to remain in the country to receive the vaccination from South Africa?
No, they'll remain in the country to receive vaccination from South Africa. Yeah.
So they don't have a choice to travel to their country to receive it and then come back?
They can if they want to, but it'll be logistically very difficult because of the travel difficulties, the flights and so forth. And some countries are not open yet. So it's going to be very difficult for them to fly to their country, get the vaccination and come back. So the simplest, the easiest thing is to wait for the vaccination in South Africa.
So you haven't received a response as to when you will get a response, basically?
Not yet. I have posted questions to the South African government through DIRCO, and we're waiting for the answers. Hopefully by next week, I think they'll probably respond to us.
Okay. Ambassador, please hold that thought. We're just going to take a quick ad break right now. Welcome back. Joining us via Zoom is His Excellency Ambassador Bene Mpoko from the DRC. Ambassador, you were sharing your thoughts with me about the vaccination. Could you please continue and share more about that?
Yes, I was saying that because we are facing this pandemic, we as Africans, if we are called upon our scientists, and we have a very, very good scientist scattered all over the world, scattered all over the continent. If we had called upon them to come and work together, they would have developed a vaccine for us. They would have developed a cure. But so that we don't always have to depend on the North, the countries are not to come to our rescue. When we also have a very good scientist. I'm in touch with some of them, and they are waiting for somebody to call upon them to come and do the work. And they are working individually. They are scattered all over the place. But if we had called upon them to come and work together, by now we would have developed a vaccine for Africa, instead of always relying on the countries of the North to come to our rescue, when we have the capacity and the capability to do it ourselves. So it's something that we need to look into. And we have suggested it to President Tshisekedi, who is the president of the African Union, to see what he can do to put our scientists together. As a matter of fact, in Congo, our scientists have developed what they call mana-COVID, which is the cure of a COVID, and the success rate is 100%, from what I've been told. You see, Madagascar came out with the Artemisia. Artemisia is a plant that is known throughout the continent. We know what Artemisia is, so it's important. It's time we call upon our scientists to do that kind of work for us.
Ambassador, you're now in this position where you're actually leading the AU. Are you going to try and channel these suggestions in terms of the scientists and getting them involved? How can you push for it to happen sooner?
We're already discussing that. It's under discussion. That's under discussion right now. We have a scientist in South Africa at the CSR. They are doing the research at the University of Stellenbosch. We have scientists in Madagascar who have already come out with something. We have scientists working in Kenya, in DRC. So the discussion is already underway to bring them together so that we can have our own treatment for this COVID. So we don't have to rely. You see, those countries in the North, they give priority to their own citizens. We are not first in line in terms of the distribution of the vaccines that they're developing there. You see, we are not first in line. So it's important we put our scientists together and and provide them the means necessary to pursue the research so that we can have our own treatment.
So what's actually delaying this? Is it the finances, protocol? What's delaying the process?
Political will. That's all we need. Political will.
Okay, Ambassador, the pandemic largely derailed many plans globally, including South Africa's plans for the AU, which included silencing the guns, women's financial inclusion, and championing infrastructure development. Will your chairship be continuing where South Africa was with these areas? And is there some sort of timeline or plan to ensure all of that President Tshisekedi's goals are attained?
Oh, definitely. There must be continuity. Silencing the gun on the continent is priority number one, because as long as the continent is unstable, we cannot embark into our development process. The development process will be impaired by the instability in the different African countries. So silencing the gun, President Ramaphosa started that initiative, and the President Tshisekedi will continue because without peace and stability, we cannot be successful in embarking into our development agenda. And the AU development agenda, as described in the Agenda 2063, it's big, it's very ambitious. But you cannot implement it if you don't have peace and stability on the continent.
So how do you forecast, how do you plan to ensure that you'll actually go ahead to address the instability?
Well, it's a collective effort. President Tshisekedi alone cannot do it. He is going to need the cooperation of other nations on the continent and other nations in the world. The UN, the international institutions like the United Nations, the Security Council. So it's a collective effort. One president alone cannot do it. He needs the cooperation of other presidents, other countries, other institutions, whether local, regional, or international. It's a collective effort. So they made effort of President Tshisekedi to bring all those factors, all those institutions together, and so that we can embark into the process of silencing the guns. And I know that he will do that. He has committed himself to doing that. Yeah.
President Tshisekedi had highlighted in his speech, amongst a long list of goals, that COVID-19, peace, climate change, gender equality, and promoting African culture are the top priorities for the AU to address amongst silencing of the guns. I'd like us to unpack each of these. In terms of COVID-19, what are the plans?
Well, as I said, the plan is to not only, first, buy the vaccine from outside. We have no choice because we don't have our own vaccine. The second is to put our scientists together to develop our own vaccine on the continent, and they can do it because they have done a lot of research. It will not take time for them to develop actually an effective vaccine. The problem is going to be the distribution because of the lack of infrastructure on the continent. And I know that a lot of countries like Kenya, Angola, even DRC, they have already bought some vaccine from outside. But it's going to be important because we don't know how long this vaccine is going to be with us. So it's to sustain our effort to combat those vaccines, we need to develop our own tools to fight it. So that's the plan. Now, when because we lack infrastructure, we will have to embark into some kind of infrastructure program because it's part of the Agenda 2063, okay, for the distribution of the vaccine. Because if you don't have infrastructure, you might have a viable vaccine, but I want to reach the people in the rural areas and so forth and so on. So that's the plan for the vaccine.
Ambassador, has the AU or will the AU be looking at knocking on other international countries' doors in terms of helping with the infrastructure? I mean, it's going to require a lot of special transportation, special warehouses, and it's going to require a lot of funds to output out. So what are the plans in that regard?
Well, initially we'll need the help through institutions like the WHO, the World Health Organization. They have the know-how. They're willing to help the continent in terms of putting in place the adequate infrastructure for that. But other institutions also are willing to help. But I was saying early on that we cannot rely on handouts from outside. The continent has got to develop its own capacity, including the infrastructure. Like in the SADC region, we have an ambitious program of the infrastructure development, but some of it is not taking place because we got hit by COVID, and most countries are experiencing economic problems. We also have developed, we have put in place the African free trade zone so that Africa can trade with Africa. African countries can trade among each other. But you cannot trade first if you're not producing. And even if you're producing, you need infrastructure to move the goods around the continent. We have been dreaming about having a rail. We talk about Cairo to Cape Town, Dakar to Djibouti, but it's become a dream. When are we going to implement it? So those are some of the challenges that we have in terms of the infrastructure, but it's doable. There is a saying that where there is a will, there is a way.
And Ambassador, what sort of support will be given in ensuring that the supply of vaccines reach across the continent?
That's the main challenge, because some of the borders are still closed among countries, you see, because of the COVID. So that's a major, major challenge to move the vaccine across the continent, because of the closure of the border. And then also our airlines, some of them are not even flying. So we have to rely on the roads, rail, and so forth. But that's also a major challenge because some
Ambassador?
of our borders are still closed.
Ambassador, I'm just gonna cut you short just for this little bit of an ad break, and then we're gonna be back with that thought. Welcome back, and thank you for joining us. Joining me via Zoom is His Excellency Ambassador Bene Mpoko, who's going to be talking to us more about what he spoke about earlier, is the vaccine and how to get it across the continent. Ambassador, you were explaining the challenges that we have at the moment as Africa.
Yes. One of the major challenges, as I mentioned, is that the fact that we're depending on the countries of the north or elsewhere to provide us with vaccine. But those countries, basically, they're giving priority to their own citizens. So we're not priority number one as far as they're concerned. So the idea is to bring our scientists together to develop our own vaccine. Secondly, even whether we're importing the vaccine, we are facing the challenges of distribution because of lack of the basic infrastructure to distribute the vaccine throughout the continent. Thirdly, most of the borders are still closed. So it's difficult to send goods today across the border. You know, even in a very well-organized region like SADC, it's becoming increasingly difficult to ship the goods across the SADC countries because the borders are not open in some areas. So these are the challenges that we are facing today, and I hope that we'll find the answers. We don't know how long this COVID is going to be with us, and how do we tackle these challenges? It's a matter of political will. As I said earlier, where there is a will, there is a way. So let's have the will to solve those problems of infrastructure.
Ambassador, in reality, we are faced with time as against us right now. Is there any other way that we're going to be able to sort out infrastructure in time? And do you think that this will actually be able, the vaccine will be able to actually reach the people that need it by this year? Or do you think it's going to go on until next year?
This year is going to be very difficult, to be realistic. Realistically, it's going to be very difficult to do it this year. I think it's more until about next year, not even the year after that, depending on how long this vaccine is going to be with us. I understand that we are going into a third variant today. So it's going to be difficult to do everything that we need to do this year.
Ambassador, with unemployment increased around the globe, how will the AU look at that? And in terms of poverty in Africa, are there any specific plans to address this?
The best way to address the unemployment on the continent is to start processing our raw materials internally on the continent. We have a young population. Our population young. It's the youngest population in the world. It's in Africa. But to employ the young population, we need to create opportunities. The major opportunities are in the manufacturing and the adding value to our raw materials so that we don't have to continue to export raw materials. When we do manufacturing of our agricultural product, our minerals, we can add value before we export them. So not only do we create the jobs for our young people, but we also add value so that the government will have more income. We export raw materials with a very small value. When we import goods from outside, they come with a high value. Do you know that the deficit through the process is $130 billion that it could be coming to our budget that we're losing because we're importing a lot of goods from outside. So the only way to create jobs is to add value to our raw materials before we export them. And I'm talking here with agricultural products and mineral products and other products, the forestry products, all of them. Why can't we add value? In Congo, for instance, is a home of strategic minerals like cobalt, like coltan, like lithium, and so forth. Those minerals are required for the electrical cars and electrical batteries and so forth. Now, Elon Musk, an African-born genius, is manufacturing electrical cars in the United States. And my question has been, why can't Elon Musk be requested to manufacture electric cars in South Africa, in Congo, or on the continent? We can do it, okay? And I have been in touch with Elon Musk family here in Pretoria, and they asked him that question. They say, would you be willing to manufacture electrical cars in the continent? He said, why not? That's his answer, okay? So it's up to us to come up with the policies to attract people like Elon Musk and others to come and invest in the continent so we don't have to continue to export our valuable raw materials, especially the minerals.
So for this to happen, we probably have to empower the citizens with the skills to do this.
Yeah, it takes, but we have people with skills. We have young engineers. We have them, they were scattered all over the place, okay? In DRC, we have a young lady who is a professor of engineering at the University of Toledo. It's called Sandrine Mubenga. She's the one who invented the hybrid electrical cars. She has invented the electrical batteries. but she's teaching engineers in engineering in the United States. We have the skills, we have the people. It's just that we don't recognize them, we don't use them. Our young people have the ability to learn, and we can train them. And it doesn't take long to train our young people, because we have those that are very gifted. I've been looking at the matric results here in South Africa, and you see young people coming out with the 7, 6 distinctions. We have the young people who are gifted. It's just a matter of having a policy to utilize them and give them the opportunity.
So will there be some sort of an award or a scholarship that's going to be assisting the youth to actually grow their knowledge?
Yeah, just embark them into manufacturing. Some of them have been trained. Those who are already trained, they just give them the opportunity. They are asking for the opportunity. But our bureaucratic systems, sometimes it doesn't give them the incentive to develop themselves or to invest. Or you look at the IT. Our young people, they are into IT. They're well qualified, but we're not using them properly. So give them the chance, either through entrepreneurship program or through a work program. So those who want to become entrepreneurs, give them incentives to do so. When I was with the UN here in South Africa, it's the time where the government of President Mandela was embarking into asking the Germans to come and manufacture cars here. So I did establish an incubation program with the CSR, so that the car manufacturers were told not to bring the seats and other parts. Those parts can be manufactured locally. So young people were trained, and they were giving opportunity, a subcontract, to make wipers or seat cars, as long as they meet the standards. A lot of them are multimillionaires today, you see. So there is a way we can embark into those programs and train our young people, give them the opportunity, and they will do it. They will do it.
It will be really nice to meet those youngsters and to actually highlight their achievements. Ambassador, just recent U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken called on the African Union and other international partners to help address the deepening crisis in Ethiopia's northern Tigray region, as he condemned alleged atrocities in fighting there. Has President Tshisekedi added Ethiopia's northern Tigray region to his plans for peace?
The Tigray issue is part of the program we talked about earlier, is silencing the guns on the continent. So it's those countries, whether it is the DRC, whether it's Tigray, whether it's Sudan, whether it's Central African Republic, each country has its own problems. So those countries with their problems, these problems have been identified. We know them, we know why. It's a matter of coming up with the solutions. We don't need this American Secretary of State to come and tell us what to do. We know what to do. Again, a matter of political will. Okay, a matter for political will. So we are going to tackle those issues during the term of office of the African President Tshisekedi. But we will not stop there. We have to continue until the whole continent is peaceful. It's a long-term program. It's a long-term process. All it requires is the Africans to work together. Yeah. And the program in Tigray is being discussed internally on the continent, and I'm sure they'll find a way out. There's already some kind of ceasefire at Tigray. As we speak, they're not really fighting as we're speaking now. So they are in the path of finding a peaceful solution. But Africans need to get together to tackle those problems.
I know we've discussed silencing the guns, and I just want to know what are the plans to address peace and which countries will be high priority requiring attention?
Yeah, the countries I mentioned, as you say, Tigray in Ethiopia, Eastern, the DRC, South Sudan, Libya, Somalia, Central African Republic, the issue of Boko Haram, those, we know what the issues are, and they're being targeted with the African Union. And once those problems are resolved, I'm hoping that the continent will be at peace so we can embark into a sustainable development program for our people.
And how do the procedures work to address these issues? Does President Tshisekedi appoint his diplomats in those countries to speak on his behalf, or do you think he's going to speak direct to the leaders that side?
No, you see, AU is well structured. There is a structure called the Peace and Security organ within the AU. So we had to go through the peace and security structure of the AU because they are the ones who have studied those issues. They are the ones who've been monitoring those issues for years and so forth. President Tshisekedi is the overall leader, but we have experts working on those issues within the peace and security structure of the African Union.
Okay, so there's a specific organization that will handle this on behalf of the chairship.
Exactly, exactly.
Okay, and according to South Africa's Climate Justice Charter movement, a report, I'm not sure if you had seen that, but the charter had identified that the Southern African region is a climate change hotspot, making it more vulnerable to climate change compared to other parts of the world. How close will the AU plan to monitor that its members are adhering to address change?
Yes, I'm aware of it, but monitoring it is not enough. It's doing something about it, okay? So we have to make sure that we implement the provisions of the Paris Accord on the climate change. Because,
Ambassador?
You think we have to be proactive. Okay, we have to be proactive.
Sorry, Ambassador, I would like you just to hold that thought for a minute. We're gonna take a little bit of a break now. Thank you. Welcome back. Joining us to unpack the DRC's plans for the AU is His Excellency Ambassador Bene Mpoko. Welcome back, Ambassador.
Thank you.
Ambassador, before I cut you off earlier on, you were talking about climate change and the plans to address the issue. Can you share more about the plans?
Yeah, I was saying we have to be proactive with respect to the climate change. We have to fight everything with respect to the emission of gas into the atmosphere. The kind of cars we drive, the industry that we establish, and so forth and so on. We have to solve those, we have to address those issues. The Congo Basin forest, it's the biggest forest in the world after the Amazon. We had to stop cutting the trees because the Congo Basin hosts about 85 billion tons of carbon dioxide. So we had to stop cutting the trees. And so we had to be proactive in order to solve, in the long term, the climate issues. We cannot solve those problems of climate change overnight. There is a change of culture, there is a change of habits, there is a change of a lot of things we need to change in order to conserve and preserve our forest, our environment. And Brazil is having a problem because the Amazon is being destroyed. So we cannot afford to do the same thing on the continent. So the Congo Basin forest, which is one of the major lungs of the earth, must be preserved, must be protected. You see, we have to take actions like that. What we have been experiencing here is cyclones in Mozambique and so forth. We cannot just stop it overnight. We have to change our way of doing things. And so that in long term, we preserve our environment. But if we don't take the changes today that are required, we're going to destroy the environment, and we're going to continue to face issues like cyclones and so forth. It's not something you can resolve overnight. It's a matter of the change of habit, the change of mindset, and so forth. The technology today, because we are entering into the fourth industrial revolution, so the new technologies give us the ability to avoid the mistakes that we have made in the past in terms of destroying our environment. We can preserve our environment, and it's time to start that.
And to make this change happen, will the AU actually plan to monitor its member countries?
Oh, definitely. Definitely. Everybody had to adhere to the same criteria, the same habits, and so forth and so on. And we need a monitoring mechanism to make sure that each country adheres to that. And there must be penalties. If you don't follow it, there must be some kind of penalties. Okay, so that's the way to go. Yeah.
So with this monitoring mechanism, what sort of plans do you think are going to be underway to address it?
Well, we had to see what's going. We don't need to invent the wheel. We have to see what's going on elsewhere, how they're monitoring it, and whoever not adhering to the requirements of their monitoring program, what kind of penalties they're going to pay. We need to learn from other people how they're doing it. There are a few countries that have done it very well. There are countries in Latin America that are doing well. There are countries in Europe, especially the Scandinavian countries. They're doing very well in terms of trying to protect the environment. So we can learn from them. We can get some ideas from them so that we can implement it within the African Union.
Ambassador, and what are the plans to address gender equality?
Okay, a lot of countries have put into their constitution the parity, meaning in terms of government jobs, in terms of the members of the parliament, the government, and so forth, it must be 50-50. But that's theory. In practice, there are not that many countries that have implemented that, and we need to implement that. Even in my own country, our constitution says we have a parity of 50-50. In the government, in the parliament, the institutions, we have to 50-50. But we have not implemented that. I understand that Rwanda is probably the only country that has implemented that 50-50 thing. Also, we need to look into our culture, how we raise our children, how the boys are treated and how the girls are treated. In most African culture, what we see is that the boys were allowed to go and play soccer when the girls are washing dishes. The boys are playing when the girls had to go fetch the water, walk miles to get the water. So we already create inequality the way we raise our children. Why can't the boys also be washing dishes? Why don't they go fetch the water? Why does it have to be only the girls? You see, so we need, it's a mental thing. It's a cultural thing, which we need to change if we're going to have a parity, if we're going to have a gender equality, because the girl is raised differently from the boys. And it's within the African culture, and we need to change that.
Yeah, we need to, the change of the mindset and society and the way we bring up our kids has to obviously be re-looked at to address this whole issue.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yes. And Ambassador, one of the goals is of the AU for the chairship is to also promote the African culture, which we just spoke about now. So how do you see this unpacking?
Well, the culture defines who we are. Okay, it defines who we are. Some of us who had opportunity to go and study overseas, we survived there by being loyal to our own culture, by not getting involved to the culture of the host country. I went to the United States at the time of student arrest and the hippie movement, the marijuana thing. No, I said, well, I come from a culture where I was not allowed to smoke. I was not allowed to do this and this. So I'm not going to do it here just because I'm in America. So it's my culture that helped me to survive in that environment because it defined who I was. Okay. So the culture is very important. So there are very good aspects, positive aspects about the African culture in general. We share values, we share everything, we take care of our parents, there are specific aspects that are very positive within African culture, and we should preserve them. But those aspects we need to change, as I said, the way we raise our children, we should also change them. So it's as the world is evolving, we also had to evolve. But I think in general, African culture is very rich, and we need to preserve it because it depends who we are.
Ambassador, is there any other plans that I have not mentioned that you'd like to share with us?
No, I think you have we have covered everything. The only thing is that again, I am emphasizing the thing that on the continent, in order to lift our continent economically, the only thing I want to emphasize is we need to start transforming our raw materials locally to create jobs. And secondly, we need to stick together. We need to work together, share experiences, and so forth. It's their unity that will make this continent strong.
Great, amazing empowerment words from Ambassador Bene Mpoko. Thank you so much for joining us today, Ambassador.
Thank you for having me.
Well, that's His Excellency Ambassador Bene Mpoko, who joined us today to unpack the DRC's plans for the AU. We'll see you next week with more information.